Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chin Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down remotely for a 2 hour conversation with Andrew Selman. Andrew is a lifelong Hamiltonian, data analyst, auditor, active civic participant, and a candidate running for Ward 3 Councillor in the October 2026 municipal election in Hamilton. We explore his personal story, the exact moment he decided to move from commenting on City Hall to running for office, his data driven views on Hamilton's housing crisis, rising property taxes, encampments, and public safety, drug policy, transparency at City Hall, and the kind of city he hopes his daughter will inherit in 20 years. This is a deep, honest, and at times emotional discussion about the real challenges and opportunities facing our city. Please enjoy this conversation with Andrew Selman. Good morning, Andrew. Thank you very much for your time today and for being on the Chin podcast.
Good to be here.
Many, oh, thank you, Andrew. Many know you in Hamilton already, and many will get to know you after this conversation. Andrew, before we talk politics, tell us who you are outside of X, of course, formerly Twitter, and City Hall meetings. Who are you?
And nice to be here, and it's great to be on the podcast today. So, yeah, if you don't know me already, I'm a lifelong Hamiltonian. So I'm a Ward 3 dad. I'm Fred and Maureen's son. I'm Kylie's husband and Hazel's father. If you know me, I'm interested in data, analytics, auditing, and that's really my professional focus, and also my focus here in the city. When I'm not looking at data and stuff like that, I'm often walking in the park with my dog, playing with my daughter out in the park with my wife. Or you find me working on various things in the community. So I sit on the Division 2 Superintendent's Citizen Police Committee, or you can find me out volunteering often doing park cleanups and stuff like that. So, I'm a dad, I'm a Hamiltonian, I'm an active member of our community, I hope.
All right, very good. And so you mentioned data analysts. I believe also compliance and corporate audit, and
Yeah.
really very much into processes, and of course a very active civic participant at City Hall.
Sure.
What originally got you interested in public policy and municipal politics, Andrew?
It's a good question. And, Daniel, this might date me a little bit, but it goes back to probably like 1996 at Westdale High School. At that time, we had, it was Dalton McGuinty. He had come into our high school to do a talk about him running for the Ontario leadership race for the provincial Liberal Party at that time. I had a chance to ask Mr. McGuinty a question, and it was really my first introduction to politics. And I think I asked about, for a 15-year-old, a pretty tough question. It was on the news, and that really sparked my interest for understanding how things are done and how we can make them go a little bit better.
Mhm. So if that says 1966, that means how old are you, Andrew?
86.
86. Okay, I wouldn't ask the age.
96, Daniel. Don't age me too much.
Okay, I wouldn't. And so then what was your first moment where you thought something isn't right with how the city is being run? What was that first moment where you have that thought? In Hamilton, we are talking about, as we are based in Hamilton.
Hamilton is my main focus, Dan. That's where I live, and really where I focus my attention. There's probably a bunch of different points that really sparked my interest in municipal politics. And I've always loved politics. I've focused on provincial, international. I really wanted to focus on municipal politics because this is where you can make immediate changes. This is where I can really use my voice and work with neighbors to make things change. Probably what first caught me was seeing the budget go up year over year. So if you track our property taxes, they've gone up 20% over the last 4 years. That's been challenging for a lot of my neighbors, certainly, and especially those that have been in their homes for so long. But really, what probably grabbed me most is just walking around Ward 3 and seeing some of the blight and decay. I had a neighbor reach out shortly after we moved here, and I started talking about some of these issues. And they said, here's a building that I've been working on, burned down about 30 years ago, and we've seen no progress since then. Um, so that really frustrated me. And that, I told him at that point, I'm going to work on this building with you together and we're going to get this fixed. So seeing some of those long ignored issues have been really what sparked my interest and got me involved directly here in Ward 3.
Yep, I saw it. That building, was it 1135 Main Street East, or was it one on Sherman?
Nope, you got it. So
The
that's
Yep.
1135 Main Street East. It's called the Smith Building.
Hmm.
If you Google it, any of the viewers out there, you'll find Spectator articles about this from years and years ago. So yeah, this one, it's disappointing. I think it's an 8 to 12 unit apartment building, a walk up building. It's been burned out. It's been a blight on our neighborhood,
Hmm.
for decades. This could have been housing. This could have been something that we had a commercial tenant on the main floor to return a tax base, to return dignity to our neighborhood.
Hmm.
But the reality is over these years, it's just continued to decay and pull down our neighborhood. So when you look at stuff like this, that's such a big opportunity.
Hmm.
That's the stuff that I really want to get in and start addressing to really start improving our neighborhood.
Yep, and there are many buildings like that, Andrew, in Hamilton, that can be done something about, and actually have housing. It can be housing for people. So going back, Andrew, your childhood, was there any? How was that? Let's get to know Andrew as a kid,
Sure.
and what what experiences shaped your world view. Of course, you said you always had an interest in politics, but any experiences as a child that shaped your worldview?
Sure. So I'm a Hamiltonian. As I said, I've grown up here in Hamilton for really my entire life. Our family has been here for generations. I'm lucky to have gone to the same high school that my parents went to and the same high school that my grandparents went to, and they were born here in the city in 1930. Um, you know, Childhood, my family, I've had a terrific family and terrific life. We have 4 kids in our family, so I have a twin brother and 2 sisters. When I think back to my childhood and really what shaped me, it was a lot of those conversations around the dinner table. And that dinner table is sitting upstairs in my dining room right now. So, we often sit down at the dinner table and discuss with my mother and my father. My father was an international businessman. We talk about business. We talk about the cost of groceries. We talk about life. We also goof around and shoot mashed potatoes at each other at the dinner table and have some laughs. All of those times are what taught me things that I still carry today. And one of those things was, my father would always say, life isn't fair. I'm not going to be fair either. So I try to take that approach as I go forward. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me practical, I think. It keeps me understanding that, life's not always going to be fair. You have to keep pounding away at problems sometimes. And if you do so, you're going to get a solution.
So very much those discussions around the dinner table, it really influenced your thinking growing up, Andrew. And you'd say your dad is one of your mentors in your life. What did you have any of the mentors, teachers, etc. in your
I
life?
was
Would
so
you
lucky.
say?
My father, yeah, he was, as I said, an international businessman. He just passed away recently
Oh,
due to
sorry to
dementia.
hear.
Oh, appreciate that. But I learned some lessons from him, both about, business and life, but also later in life while he was going through that struggle. He really taught me a lot about strength. For my mother, huge mentor to me. My mother was a teacher. She was a home manager. And she's still with us today and still certainly the rock of her family. I've learned a ton from my grandmother. My grandma was born in 1930 in the house that her parents lived in. She was a community leader without a title. So she was always someone that stepped up for Hamilton. She volunteered. Um, she helped her friends. She was a staple down at the YMCA. So really a lot of my family are the individuals that have influenced me, my brother and my sisters as well. And, I'll just say my sister, Lisa, when I was a little bit off track as a young man, she took me in and she showed me, when I was a young man, I went and lived with her. And she really showed me the path at that point and helped me get back on track. So for me, it's always been family, and that's who's been there most for me and been my biggest influence.
Wow, that's very powerful, Andrew. And as you mentioned, essentially your roots is Hamilton, and this is a very unique city. We got the steel, well, sort of trying to go more green with the
Yep.
steel
Good thing.
in the industrial sector. Lots of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. and of course the working class roots, as you mentioned. And of course, how has living, in this city since I'd say I think it was at least more than a decade you've, I guess, moved back. How has it really shaped your perspective in government? Because a lot of interesting things I would say in the past 8 years. I've came in the city since 2014. And, the first few years was the golden years. The last 8 years was not too good, I would say, or
Mhm.
from what many of us have said. But how has really living here in Hamilton shaped your perspective, things you've seen while walking the dog every day?
Yeah, I lived here my entire life. I haven't left.
Oh,
Um,
I see.
so I've been lucky to be here. Um, Hamilton has shaped my life in so many ways. So what I'll tell you is I have lived in only one house where I'd walk out the front door and I didn't see the escarpment. So almost everywhere I've lived, I've been able to walk out my front door, look out and see those trees. So the mix of urban, forest, commercial, industrial, it's right here in the heart of Hamilton, and that has been a huge influence on me. So I'm a nature guy. I love getting out in the woods and walking, as you said, with the dog. But I also can look out my back door and I can see the industrial sector of Hamilton. Um, my family has certainly worked in there throughout the years. My grandfather was a union leader down at Westinghouse back in the 1950s. So that has certainly played a big role in our family as well. Now, as you said, I think we have lost a bit of momentum here in Hamilton over the last few years. So, I've had the benefit of time. So I've seen Hamilton during the 1980s, where we had certainly a lot of opportunities. There was a lot of crime, and downtown was really struggling at that point. I've now had the opportunity to see, as you said, some of that upswing when we did gain a lot of momentum in downtown. Um, and now we're seeing us lose some of that momentum. So, over the last few years, certainly, we've seen a lot of businesses close. We've seen downtown lose some of its luster. So when I think about what I want to work on, it's certainly getting Hamilton back to kind of that golden era and really back on track, so everyone can thrive.
And Andrew, so you are a known face in Hamilton. When you're walking the dog, people will shout out and say, "Hey, Andrew," or maybe, "Hey, whatever else, Andrew." But what do, people misunderstand about you based on social media? For those who, well, yeah, who know you,
Sure.
but they misunderstand you.
You said earlier I have a corporate background in corporate compliance auditing, as well as data analytics. I think sometimes that auditor's background can tint how I communicate and how people perceive me. So, as an auditor, I think you're trained to be, um, although use your personal skills, you want to be very direct in asking questions and addressing problems. And that's typically how I communicate. And again, that's probably a reflection of my father being such a direct man himself. People often misinterpret that. And, you mentioned people stopping me on the street. I've had both sides where people stop me and say, "Hey, great work for what you're working on." And I've had people stop and say, "Hey, I don't like what you're doing here." And I've invited them over and we've talked through these issues. So I think what surprised some of those people that maybe disagreed with me is how willing I am to talk about their views. And that's really something I love to do. So when people do disagree with me, I invite them, come talk to me. I'll sit down with pretty much anyone, discuss varying viewpoints. And quite often I'll change my viewpoint based on the experiences and information others can give me. So I think that is something that people misconstrue about me being such a direct person. Really what I do love is open communication. I love to hear different perspectives and see things from other people's eyes.
And then when you have the conversation with that person who misconstrues you, Andrew, then that person turns into a supporter and says, "Andrew, you actually talking some good things there." And then now they like you. So
Well, yeah, I don't want to speak to the exact individual, but they know who they are out there, maybe. And yeah, we had one of those conversations where they disagree. I reached out to shake their hand, and they wouldn't shake my hand. We talked for like 20 minutes. By the end of that conversation, we had a hug. We talked as neighbors, and now we're allies. So I'm really proud of those type of conversations, the difficult conversations. Easy conversations are easy, but the difficult ones are really where you got a lot of growth.
absolutely, Andrew. And I believe in I think I read October 3rd, 2024. You helped rescue a family from an apartment fire. It was a 12-unit apartment. Well, no, it was an apartment building. I believe maybe 12 units, but 12 was saved. How did that experience, or maybe you can describe a bit about the experience, but how did that shape your view of neighborhood safety, as we have had many fires in Hamilton?
Yeah, we've had a lot of fires, and it's unfortunate. That particular fire, it's emotional to talk about, and I'm going to try to keep myself together. It's one of those things. Um, when I think about that incident, when I walked up, what really inspired me was neighbors were mustered together. They were talking about the problem and solutions that they were willing to work on. So when I arrived, they knew what they had to do, which was go around to the back of the building, get up the staircase that was on fire, and get someone behind that door. And they were actively trying to do so. Um, so myself personally, when I got there, I was inspired by what they were trying to do. And, they couldn't get past some of the flames and smoke. And for whatever reason, I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Kicked down the door and got the family out. But what my main takeaway from that is how willing people are, how willing people are to work together when it's an emergency situation or when something needs to get done. People don't debate about who they are, what they believe. They just work together. Um, and that's a takeaway that I will forever carry with me. I love working together with people. I don't care who you vote for, what your political beliefs are. I just want to work towards a common goal. That's what we did that day, and that's something I'll never forget.
Well, it was very heroic, and to attend, at the scene there, Andrew.
Right
Now,
place, right time. just
yes,
not
yeah.
a block for me.
Now I have read through all of your you're very, very active on X. For those who don't know, X, formerly Twitter. And I've read through all these posts, as you mentioned, I believe mid last year, 2025. You announce your candidacy to run for Ward 3. So what was the exact moment you decided, I'm not just going to comment on all these matters or concerns you see in your respective ward? And just to be more specific for viewers, the ward Andrew is running for is Ward 3, and on the map of Hamilton, that is the boundaries: Wellington Street, Ottawa Street, Niagara Escarpment, to the Hamilton Harbor. So that outlined in the map of Hamilton. So all these matters that many of us are not pleased with, that are happening in the city, as in particular to this ward. What was at the exact moment you decided, I'm not just going to comment, I'm going to run?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, honestly, I started posting on social media. I post everywhere on Instagram, X, YouTube. I kind of put out the same stuff everywhere. And I started doing so because I wanted to engage more with people, specifically about municipal politics. Um, there's a few different points. I mentioned walking around Ward 3 and see some of the derelict buildings. And, there was buildings back onto Memorial School. They'd sat here for a decade that were burned out, that kids were getting into. That was a big motivating factor for me because I knew that the neighborhood had been complaining about this for that decade and nothing was done. Um, there's other instances where sometimes it's a really small thing. So when we moved into this house, I walked up to Main Street and I found a hole in the sidewalk surrounded by a sawhorse. I went and looked on Google Maps and it had sat there for 2 years. It had been sitting there for the last 2 years. So you start to look at these things and you ask yourself, and myself with my professional background, what's the process? What process is taking place here? What process breakdowns are taking place? And how can we improve them? So when I started to, address and speak to politicians and those in charge at City Hall, they couldn't necessarily identify the broken process steps that were taking place and why some of these issues were remaining for so long, be it the burned out building, be it that sawhorse and the hole in the sidewalk. So that was a big motivating factor. One of the other major incidences or motivating factors was certainly the micro shelter procurement process. So if you do follow me on social media, that's something you know that I talk a lot about. And I think I first went down to City Hall in probably late 2024. And I had identified at that point to the city that, we had some serious concerns with this vendor being created just weeks prior, as well as the procurement process. Um, what I saw from City Hall was a delayed response, and that resulted in that project going 300% over budget. And in one of my early delegations, I told City Hall, when the costs are coming in, when the lawsuits start piling up, you can't say you weren't warned. Since that point, the costs did come in. As I said, they were 300% over budget. Lawsuits have been launched, and this has become really an international, or at least a Canada-wide story. So that was probably the final push towards, saying, I think I could do something here, especially with my auditing and data analytics background, to improve this process and ensure we get a better use of taxpayer dollars. And you know
Yes,
what?
and
One more thing to add there, and help more people. Because when we don't use our money effectively, we're not helping as many people as we could. And so that was a motivating factor as well. And I want to see as many people get helped as we
yeah.
can.
Thank you, Andrew. And just to be specific, that Barton Tiffany micro shelter, when you say 300% over, it started off, I believe, roughly about 2 million and went over 5 million over budget. And I remember that there was a post from Councillor Mike Spadafora that said
Mhm.
the city spent $1 million in electrical work for that site, and they used a
Yeah.
bit of government funding. But we're jumping a little bit ahead, and as I was listening, and you mentioned some of these unsafe or abandoned buildings. In the past week, there was one, I believe, 606 Aberdeen, where a teenager fell through the roof and died, and that was not good news.
Breaks my heart.
Um,
Breaks my heart. I used to walk past. So we grew up, as I said, I went to West Hill High School. Our family home was within a half kilometer of that site. And we would walk past that site every day on the way to school. Again, dating myself here, but that was back in the 1990s. That building and that location has been a problem since then in terms of bylaw compliance and having trespassers on site. And you know what? This is, broader than that individual problem. It's a reflection of, opportunities in bylaw compliance, but also opportunities in revitalization in the city. And that's really something I think we need to really have a unified approach and process on as we move forward, because we can't allow, decades of decay to dictate our future. And really, that's something I refuse to accept as a citizen.
yep. And of course, since you announced your candidacy, I believe starting it was May 2025. Most people would say running for office is not easy, Andrew.
It's
You
not.
can encounter a lot of public criticism. It's a lot of time commitment as you have spent, and of course the risk of family impact. Why take that risk, Andrew?
It's something people love. First and foremost, I love this city. I absolutely adore Hamilton. I look at what we are, and I'm super proud of that. But I look at what we can be, and I think we have so many opportunities that we're currently not addressing. Um, to me, it felt like the risk of not running was greater than the risk of running. I'm someone that I'm willing to try almost anything. I'm really not deterred by the potential for failure. I'm more motivated by the potential of success. And when I think about what we can do, I think about what I can do for my daughter, all the people, that are growing up in this city, but also all the people that have lived here in this city for generations, the taxpayers that are maybe struggling in their home after living there for 40 years with tax increases. I think about my neighbors, my neighbor 2 doors over, who's 80 plus, and they're certainly struggling with some of those. So, yeah, there's some risks. People personally attacking you, and there's some graffiti in the neighborhood about me, but I am undeterred by that, and I'm more excited about the possibility of positivity.
Wow, very well said, Andrew. I love it. And the risk of not doing anything is of not running is much greater than etc. So now if you win, Andrew, what does success look like after 4 years? There was, I believe, four things you mentioned that you focused on in one of your ex posts. One was safety and potholes. There was pro-business redevelopments, as you mentioned, with these projects, and fiscal responsibility.
Mhm.
What does success look like for you after 4 years? 4 years later, Andrew Selman is Councillor Ward 3. 4 years later would be, I think, 31, 20,
God, yeah.
yeah, something like that.
I can't like say it's hard to believe, right? Um, Success to me is seeing a diverse Hamilton thrive. I want to see a budget that is fully audited and transparent. I want to see alleys in Ward 3 that are clean, parks that are clean, streets that are well paved. I want to see, families thriving in our neighborhood. To me, a successful Hamilton is a Hamilton that has really good HSR transit, a restored sense of pride in our city, and a trust in City Hall. And I want to see small businesses thrive in all of our commercial corridors. Main Street and Barton Street are perfect examples. In my ideal Hamilton, we actually start to make some progress along Barton Street. And, if you come down to Barton and Ottawa Street with me, and Daniel, I think you live pretty close to me here, probably. You know that that's been an opportunity for decades. This council has certainly set that as a goal. I don't think they've seen success there. So a successful Hamilton to me would see those corridors addressed. And, I'd extend that to downtown and certainly down to Kenilworth as well, Kenilworth Avenue, where we previously lived. Huge opportunities there. So yeah, returning a tax base, returning businesses, returning individuals into some of those apartments that we discussed earlier, some of those brownstones. That's a successful Hamilton to me.
Yep, it was supposed to Ottawa Street. It in the news 2015 was supposed to be the street that was to take off businesses. They moved in, and it's sad to see that some have closed and moved out. And there was actually a fire recently above one of the restaurants, Hamburger, I believe, last week. But
It was Nerdcore. So unfortunately the business called Nerdcore lost their entire inventory and their entire shop. So huge, my heart goes out to them. It's really disappointing to see such a loss. And I think that fire started at the back of the building. But yeah, quick actions by the firefighters prevented it from spreading into Hamburger. I know they had to, I think, smash through the glass there, so they took some damage. But yeah, we have seen some businesses close along Ottawa Street. Ottawa's still certainly thriving. It's, myself and my family, we spend a lot of time down on Ottawa Street. It's our favorite thing to do on Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons. But yeah, we want to continue to see Ottawa Street thrive and see some of those shops that have recently closed, and even that one where we saw that fire, hopefully open back up.
yep. And of course, this question will be more like a given. Why, of course, why Ward 3 specifically? But more importantly, what do you think the residents in Ward 3 are most frustrated about? And just for those, again, Ward 3 in Hamilton, outlined in the map, is between Wellington Street, Ottawa Street, as Andrew just mentioned, from the Niagara Escarpment and to the Hamilton Harbor. That's all of that. I just drove those streets this morning. So yeah. And what are residents in Ward 3 most frustrated about, and why run for Ward 3 specifically?
Sure. So, I mean, if we're not talking about taxes, because I think everyone is frustrated with the state of taxes in this city. I think everyone is frustrated with the state of roads. So I'm not going to talk about potholes. I think one of the biggest opportunities, and one of the things I talk with so many of my neighbors about, is again that urban blight and decay. So I mentioned those burned out buildings that back onto Memorial School. We worked together as a neighborhood, and we had a ton of support on that to get those buildings demolished. We did so by public delegations, by engaging with the media, by public letter writing campaigns, and copying as many provincial, federal politicians as possible. So there's a lot of want to address that urban decay and urban blight. So Main Street, again, right here in Ward 3, there are hundreds of, unoccupied derelict buildings. I think we need a uniform strategy to address those. And really what I'd be looking to do is come in with a very aggressive kind of 90-day initial plan to start addressing that. Outside of that, there's certainly always some safety concerns and things like that. You see some break-ins in vehicles and stuff of that nature, which I think the Hamilton police are doing a great job engaging with and speaking to neighbors about. But probably the number one thing outside of taxes, outside of roads, is working on some of these derelict buildings and really improving them and improving our neighborhood.
Absolutely, Andrew. And this would be a big question here, but I'll phrase it as, why should voters choose or support you over other candidates?
It's a good question. What I'll say is, what I think I bring to any organization is, my skills as an auditor. So I'm well versed in looking at processes, understanding where those breakpoints are, and then working to address them. I'll give you an example of how I've done so. So here in the city of Hamilton, we have a lot of issues with bylaw compliance. We discussed that building down on, unfortunately, where that young man passed away. Bylaw compliance is being a major issue. So what I did was I actively have been addressing that. I went down and met with the acting director of bylaw to understand where our breakpoints are. There's many at this point. So I will take a active approach. I don't just sit at home. I get out there, I make phone calls, I meet with people. I have a data analytics background, and that really gives me an ability to make decisions based on data as opposed to feelings. And that's how I try to approach most problems in life. I look at, what does the information tell me? What do the facts tell me? As opposed to what do my own feelings tell me, which I can often get wrong with my own feelings. So you know what? I don't want to talk about anyone else. What I can tell you about myself is I'm an engaged individual. I am someone that approaches problems in a very process-orientated manner, and I use data to make informed decisions.
And going back to one of the things you said earlier about our city haven't done an audit, to be more specific, we haven't done an audit since a cyber attack, I believe, 3 years ago, where it cost us north of 18 million, or I'm not sure what the total cost of that. But since then, our financial statements in the city of Hamilton we haven't done a full audit.
Yeah.
But City Housing Hamilton did their full audit and disclosed in November 2024. So now we're in April 2026, and that's still a very big thing for transparency, right? Transparency, accountability, etc.
Let's talk about that a bit, Daniel. So the
Sure.
cyber attack. So I'm glad, you mentioned that. I'm glad you brought it up. So I'll actually be delegating at City Hall next week about what the actual cost of that cyber hack is. So City Hall has told you it's $18 million, but I don't think we're capturing the full breadth of what we're actually paying as a result of that. So I'll be calling on City Hall to release an updated accounting of what the actual cyber attack has cost. I'll be providing specific examples of some of the costs that aren't currently included. But I just want to mention that because I think that is a key piece of information that voters deserve to have before we vote on who runs their city. So we need to understand really what is the true financial health of our city prior to asking who's going to run it. In regards to the missing reports and statements, so yeah, there are many. There's the DC Treasurer's Report. That's a legally required document that we've failed to produce for the last 2 years. And that's having significant impacts within the development industry. They need to have that information. You talked about the audited financial statements. Again, that's a legally required document that we need to produce. We have failed to do so for the last several years. So these are things that I want to immediately get in and address because the impacts are many. So those financial statements that we haven't produced, that has resulted in the city of Hamilton having our credit downgraded. So when our credit's downgraded, a city, much like a household, when they go to build a big project, they don't pay cash for it. So when the city of Hamilton goes to build new roads or buy a bunch of new buses, we sell the municipal bonds. Now, when we sell these bonds, due to our credit being downgraded, we have to pay them back at a higher interest rate. Now, what that means is we end up paying more money back to our lenders as opposed to spending that money directly on things that impact the taxpayers, like fixing roads. So all of these, reports, the cyber attack, when they're missing, they have compounding effects that end up costing the taxpayer, me and you, and all the citizens in this city in terms of how we're actually spending our money. So huge opportunities there, and I think we can take some concrete steps to start addressing those issues and moving forward.
Yep, that's a very big one, and of course, it's a very big question that all Hamiltonians are asking. Yesterday, I read an article on the Bay Observer with regards to it was with Kelly Ucharek, a North End resident who have for one whole 1.5 year trying to get the document that discloses with the city spending 2 million in addition to 19 million when they spent in over 2 million for the damages in hotels where they housed homeless people in hotels during the pandemic years. They
Sure.
spent 19 million for those rooms, and which includes a whole barrier in the hotel, sorry, a whole floor
Yeah.
that it was empty, that separates the patrons from the actual homeless people living in the hotel. And then, there were damages that the city had to pay 2 million. Took Kelly Ucharek 1.5 year, 2 appeals with provincial, trying to get information from Freedom of Information.
Yeah.
And then they finally released that document this, I think, beginning April, right? The first week of April. And when Kelly Ucharek mentioned it was August 2025. City of Hamilton got an award for good governance, for
Yes.
accountability and transparency. It's very the opposite from what her experiences was, and she has been very vocal in things with these things with respect to city and also city spending. For instance, with the Beneto Community Center that was supposed to be just a warming center, but then it turned to overnight shelter and cost the city $100,000. So accountability, transparency, and the spending, or should I say, city needs to be spending more responsibly.
I just want to say, I hope everyone reads that article that you're referencing, because it's a really enlightening piece of information that I think citizens should really look at. Well, and shout out to Kelly. Incredibly dedicated effort here to get that information, and it shouldn't take that. Like, it really shouldn't take a citizen having to ask for almost 2 years to get basic information like this. It's our money. This is stuff that we're paying for. Just what I want to highlight there is, within that article, it noted, and you referenced the lack of transparency. So the city had initially said, we don't track that information in terms of how much we're spending on repairs. They were tracking that. So, again, why are we not being transparent when it's clear that this information is available? We can talk about transparency until my face goes blue, but I'll give you one more example. We had a mayor's task force on transparency, a survey and report that came out recently. Within that initial request, we had, debated between two different outside organizations, two consultants, to conduct the survey for us. They had promised to reach thousands of Hamiltonians for this transparency survey. City Council can decide which one of those consultants to book. We decided to hire them both. So we ended up hiring two consultants to conduct this transparency report. They blacked out in the report how much we paid those consultants. And the fact is, they only reached a few hundred individuals. So when we talk about transparency, especially in a transparency report, why are we hiding how much we're paying for outside consultants? And really, when we look at this report, it wasn't a very effective report due to that super small sample size that did not capture the diverse subset of Hamiltonians of all kinds. So huge opportunity and transparency. And really, I just hope to go back and point people towards that article that you referenced in the Bay Observer, and great work by Kelly on getting that information.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. And going back to running for Ward 3 councillor. Being a councillor, I would say, is a tough job. What qualities do you believe a good city councillor must have? What qualities?
Sure. Thick skin. You're certainly going to take some jabs, some barbs, and that's something I think I'm prepared for, being the youngest child in our family. I am a twin, but I'm the youngest of our entire family. So we had a lot of my older sisters were always there and poking and prodding a bit, but eating thick skin. You certainly need good financial literacy. Learned a lot of that at the dinner table. A good understanding of process knowledge. So many of the opportunities that I've seen in this city relate back to poor process definition. So we talked about bylaw and some of the issues there. We could talk about procurement. Again, how did that project go 300% over budget, the microshelter project? That was due to poor process definition. So people were spending far above their allotted budgets, and we didn't have the correct breakpoints within the process to stop that. Um, you know, I think I have a proven track record of someone that's highly engaged. So I think you need to be engaged. You need to be someone that's willing to pick up the phone and call people. And I've done that, not as a sitting councillor, but just as a citizen. I've called up individuals in the micro shelter space. And I've learned a lot. And that's really what, as I started speaking out about the micro shelter project, that's how I learned that these shelters did not meet electrical code. And I let the city know about that, a year and a half ago, long before it was reported in the media. So for me, being engaged, being someone that has a good financial literacy, understanding the process and where we can fix them, those are some of the things that I really feel are the core characteristics of a good counselor, but also just, a good, any kind of good worker, I think.
Yep. And just to take it back, Andrew, when you're talking about that procurement process for the Barton Tiffany shelter, where the city ordered 40 cabins to house the homeless people, they wrote the check for $2 million to the, I guess, newly incorporated company before even receiving the product. And they just wrote the check, $2 million. Here you go.
We paid 100% upfront, Daniel, to a company that was created weeks prior. We were that company's first ever sale. That company had never been in this business, and I don't believe they've made any sales since then. And what I'll tell you is, I've of course delegated about this multiple times. The city of Hamilton was being lobbied by this company for weeks and months prior to the company even being registered as a real corporation. So what checks and balance were in place when this company was lobbying the highest office in City Hall, the mayor's office? They shouldn't be able to walk in the door, but they were able to do so and secure a major contract with no experience in this business. So process.
And I believe lawsuits are still ensued, and like it's still ongoing. And then a full audit report, or has that been completed already beginning this year?
Yeah, so the Auditor General had a pretty fulsome report. That was as a result of citizens reaching out directly to the Auditor General and making complaints. And that was a good thing for citizens to do. I can tell you, I'm not going to speak too much to the lawsuit, but certainly, yeah, there is a lawsuit in place, and I've been in contact with some of those people that are involved in that lawsuit. So I have a good breadth of knowledge there. Don't want to speak too much to it, but yeah, it's a really interesting case. The Auditor General, so certainly he made recommendations within his report. A lot of them were incredibly basic. So, we can look at those. Maybe we'll talk about that in detail as we go forward. But when you look at the recommendations, it's disappointing we weren't doing some of these things already. And as an organization, it's pretty unacceptable to see the state of our house as laid out by the Auditor General.
Yep. Well, we will look forward to our updates, and sometimes articles come up on the public record and the Bay Observer that reveals or follows up on these matters. And I think as you were speaking 5 minutes ago, Andrew, you partially answered what my next question would have been, which is really what's the differentiator of your approach versus the other candidates. I believe there are two more in addition to the current counselor that will be running again. Your data analytics, compliance audit, all those things are speaking music to my ears, because it's what the city needs, given that we haven't done a full audit for a few years. But just to reiterate again for the viewers and the listeners that are in Hamilton and outside of Hamilton, what was your differentiated approach versus others, your other candidates? To
So,
speak
I
only
think I
for
take
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that. I think I take a very direct approach, and we've kind of discussed that throughout, and it's, due to what my background is, but I'm someone that looks at problems directly and I call them out publicly. And I don't do so to embarrass people or to, try to shame people, but it's because we have a process issue in this city and not a people problem. So what I think differentiates me is that ability to clearly look at a problem, clearly explain the problem to be it citizens or other counselors, and work to look towards solutions collaboratively together. I pride myself on being able to, work in groups with any kind of people, all kinds of different people. So, what differentiates me is that ability to jump into a problem, clearly understand where that problem lies by looking at the different process details and using data to form solutions based on what the information is really telling us.
Yep. And Andrew, I believe your position in the Hamilton Services Police Service as a superintendent's advisory committee that you sit on, your role is to also report crime concerns to Hamilton Police.
Yeah, so this was an interesting opportunity that came up for me. So the Hamilton Police reached out and asked me to join their superintendent's police committee for Division Two. So what we do is we speak about certainly local crime issues in our neighborhood here in Ward 3, Ward 4, all the areas that cover Division Two. So we've spoke about, in terms of some local crime issues here, some of the illegal cannabis shops, we've discussed them and seen some action take place. We discussed those burned down buildings on Ottawa Street where we saw individuals crossing into them. But then we also have an opportunity to look at data, and which is right in my wheelhouse. We just had a presentation last week with their data analyst, and then take us through presentations on various different crime issues in the city. So we've had presentations on the shooting response team from the hate crime unit, and that was honestly one of the most enlightening presentations that I've had a chance to sit in on. Great questions and answers, and I learned a lot about the process there. So really, what we do is we discuss local issues, but then we also look at presentation information in a more broad scope. And it's an opportunity for just regular citizens like myself to get engaged in the process, really outside of politics, purely nonpartisan, and talk about solutions. And that's really what we're focused on.
That's a very important role, Andrew. And I always joke and say for those that are coming into Hamilton on York Boulevard, usually you'll see the welcome sign, but you see a big Crime Stoppers sign to say
Yeah.
calls Crime Stoppers.
Yeah. Call 'em.
Yeah. So thank you for Crime Stoppers.
Yes.
Now we identified, Andrew, many problems, or as you have mentioned earlier. But we also have one of the big problems, which is a housing crisis in Hamilton and other municipalities as well. And however you want to define it, Hamilton, yes, is facing a housing shortage and rising rents. What do you believe are the real causes? You can go in depth. You can go very just overview scope of it.
Sure. As you said, it's not a Hamilton specific issue. It's across Ontario. It's across Canada. It's across much of the Western Hemisphere. We've seen the cost of living, particularly related to housing, increase significantly. I think so often the job of a counselor is to respond to a problem with the best solutions possible. So some of the solutions that I'm seeing at City Hall to address the housing crisis, I don't believe are going to have that actual effect. So let's talk about quickly the vacant unit tax. So that tax is a new tax they've introduced with the stated goal of returning homes back to the market. I personally don't believe there's any evidence to actually prove that vacant unit tax returns homes back to the market. If the councillors want to come out and say, this actually is just a tax to punish people for how they decide to use their own property, that's fair enough. But I don't believe that we're being perfectly clear because it does not, there's no evidence that it returns homes to the market. And we've seen the example of Ottawa often used. But really, when you look at their data, the year over year change is almost zero. What I think we can do to get Hamilton back on track is our permitting process. So, Daniel, as you probably know, Hamilton has one of the slowest permitting offices in Canada and certainly in Ontario. So we need to make major structural changes there to streamline our processes. So when builders do want to build, they can get those permits as quickly as possible. And just a couple of weeks there, just this week rather, there's an article in the Spectator about the church across from the TD Coliseum. They had worked on, they had tried to redevelop that location for years. It got caught up in city hall bureaucracy. And since that time, the financial world has changed and the world of development has changed. And unfortunately, that's scuttled that project. But that's the perfect example of where we could have had housing built if we were quicker on that permitting process, and ensure we actually, take steps to improve that. So when I look at Hamilton, when I look at what we can do, that's probably one of our biggest opportunities is streamlining the process, making sure that when people have good plans and they get into us, we turn that around as quick as possible.
Andrew, which development site was that specifically you mentioned?
That was the Philpott Church. So that's right on York Street across from TD Coliseum. So they had planned on redeveloping it, got
Oh,
stuck in,
yes.
yeah, got stuck in
Yes.
development. It's going to now use the site for a parking lot, which honestly it's well needed for TD Coliseum. And it's exciting in terms of TD Coliseum. We're seeing lots of people downtown and they will have somewhere to park, but we could have had housing there. And that's just an example of where we got caught up in the paperwork. We could have turned that around quicker.
Yes, and Core Urban doing the Copley building
Yes.
opposite the farmers market. So they're doing some good works there.
Mhm.
And yes, so going back as you mentioned the development, I read Ontario Home Builders Association. Hamilton takes about 33 point something months, just up to 33 point something months to get approval, whereas in Halifax it's only 9 point something months
Yes.
in terms of getting approval, the timeline. So that really says we do have a lot of inefficiencies, in the approval for developments, and that's not good for the real estate developers. So you did mention some of the things to encourage more housing supply. Recently, you probably saw the Connie and Ford announcement for um, uh, cutting 50% of no, cutting the development charges, right? So
Of course. Yep.
8.8 billion, right, for 3 years, and then removing the HST on new homes up to 1 million to help with housing supply. What policies would you support to increase housing construction in
So
Hamilton or generally?
Certainly we can look at the DCs. Now, obviously, there's only so much that we can play with those, right? We can look at lowering them, and really, I think we need a fulsome analysis of understanding the cost to benefit there. But I think there is some opportunity to probably look at those and where we can reduce them. Um, you know, I want to see what we can do to encourage development in some of these long derelict sites that we discussed. So, going back to the Smith building on Main Street, 1135 Main Street East. That's I think, as we said, about a 12-unit apartment building. It has sat for decades. So, is there any opportunity to look at what other successful cities have done or what other cities have done successfully in this space of derelict buildings? So I'm certainly interested in looking at, what Detroit's done, for example, in establishing a land bank authority, establishing 3P partnerships and seeing if we can, use the land bank to acquire some of these properties, return them to a market. And I think we really could return a profit to the taxpayer as well by doing so. But a big opportunity we have is certainly addressing some of these buildings that are sitting empty, that could be housing, that could be a tax base, that could be public housing to the market. So that's a huge focus of mine. And I think it's a big opportunity that we can capitalize on.
Yep, and as you touched before on the vacant unit tax, part two question to that, given your data analyst, what metrics would you track to measure if new policies are actually working in Ward 3 or policy or existing policies, like the vacant unit tax. And then we also have the rain tax, I believe, which is deferred to January 1, 2027.
Mhm.
But the farmers in Hamilton were not too happy with the rain tax. They
Yeah.
deferred that discussion a year out. Of course, we need a sort of a system to track or measure, because we can't just spend over 3 million in the vehicle unit tax, a million here, million there, and not really measure the results thus far.
If you don't measure it, you can't manage that, and that's you can't manage it. That's an old, data analytics and auditor phrase for sure. So, you have an interesting question there, and I'm probably going to maybe fill in a bit more than you initially asked. But
Mhm.
what I'd like to see is a municipal dashboard. And I'll tell you, Daniel, I've built one myself using City of Hamilton data where it's published, but I've pulled in data from other municipalities as well, where we don't have that data. So Burlington, Brantford, things like that. Specific to development, I'd like to see a dashboard that reports out like things such as days to permit approval. Because really, once you start having that information public facing, the public can start managing it and understanding how the city of Hamilton or rather, citizens can start measuring it and understand how the city is actually managing those processes. And within that dashboard, of course, wouldn't just have planning data. Within my own dashboard, I have bylaw data. So you can look at it, at a ward level, at a specific bylaw violation level. I have financial data in my dashboard, pulling in multiple years of budget data. Um, you can look at the planning dashboard. Even on my tab, you can go and look at different development projects and what stage of the pipeline they're currently in. And most of this is just being built on open data sets that the city of Hamilton does have. Now, unfortunately, those data sets aren't currently organized in a manner that most people can use. If you're not a data analyst, it might be a little bit difficult. They're just raw data, Excel or CSV files. Um, but that's something I'd really like to see is proactive use of the data and information we have to publicly present that information to decision makers, both at City Hall and voters who are the ultimate decision maker.
And that certainly will help us to eliminate those inefficiencies that we, continue to see at City Hall,
Mhm.
Andrew. So moving on. Previously, you mentioned we Hamilton property taxes keep rising. On January 19th, 2026, yes, because we're in 2026, I'm thinking 2025,
Me
we
too.
had a delegate named Michelle Hamilton
Yes,
delegated, and I listened to it, and
she's
very
great.
great speaker, single mom with two kids,
Yeah,
spoke about the property taxes have risen with the previous council from 2019 to 2022, cost about 478 bucks increased in property taxes. Under this current council, $1,700 increase in her annual property taxes. But
sure.
the one line which Michelle said was homeowners are being priced out of their own homes, and she raised the same concerns, most of what you already mentioned with spending and where we are not getting our value for our taxpayer dollars, and there has been a lot of spending in Bart and Tiffany, as you mentioned, over
Mhm.
5 million. The Hamilton bus barn on Birch Avenue, over 100 million overage, right, in that project, and I can
Yeah.
go down much more the list. But where do you believe the biggest spending problems are? You can repeat some of the same pertaining to this question. Quick ask from me, Daniel Chin. If you are enjoying the Chin podcast, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Our mission is simple: to inform, inspire, and advance economic prosperity right here in Hamilton through honest conversations about business, policy, and real estate. Subscribing helps us grow, bring on better guests, and deliver even stronger episodes for you. Thank you, and let's build this together.
there's a lot of creep, right? So we've seen a lot of budget creep. We've seen, as you said, our property taxes go up about 20% over the last 4 years. During that period of time, we've seen hundreds of new employees come into City Hall. Um, and I ask so many people, have you seen your services get 20% better? I certainly haven't. So we certainly need to understand, you know, where we're bringing people into the organization, and is it really addressing the core needs that we have in this city? Um, we're the consultant black hole. So we spend millions of dollars, millions, huge amounts of money, um, paying outside consultants in the city. And I pointed back to um, the transparency survey that we hired consultants to do. That's work that we can do internally. And there's a lot of that work that we should be looking at. Can we do this internally? If we can't, what can we do to build up our own core staff so they can start to handle some of those tasks? Now, there's a lot of opportunity in procurement. So you mentioned the Barton and Tiffany, and yeah, we house people there, and that's a beautiful thing. But we wasted a lot of money due to that poor process. And then I'll tell you, there is a lot of money wasted right now due to rework in the city. And the unfortunate reality is the cyber attack is still being blamed for this. So I referenced earlier all the different downstream effects of the cyber attack, and I talked about the bylaw office. So right now, bylaw, and this is what I learned from speaking to the acting director of bylaw, Mr. Smith, is they don't, or at least when I spoke to him just a few months back, they didn't, or they haven't recovered at this point since the hack, and they've been tracking bylaw complaints with emails to each other, with like Outlook reminders, with rudimentary Excel spreadsheets. And many of the bylaw citations, the violations that they have gone out and submitted, simply expired. They just let them expire. So when you think about that, how much work have we spent, or how much money have we spent doing that work to simply let it expire and then have to go out and do it again? So the cost of rework in this city is significant. Um, all of these issues relate back to not the cyber hack, but the ability to respond to the cyber attack. So huge opportunities across the city. Those are just a few of the ones that I could talk to, consultants. Another thing I just want to quickly mention is, we've spent a ton of our reserves. It's a big problem over the last few years. So our reserves have significantly dropped down. I think one of our reserves is slated to go down to about $1 million. That's being done to artificially keep our tax increase lower than it actually is. We're still at 20% over the last 4 years. But if you look at what the tax increases are projected at over the next 2 years, I think they're somewhere 8 to 10% each year. And that's in part due to our reliance on reserves and some of this misspending. So we want a lot of opportunities in this city. We need a plan on how we're going to rebuild our reserves, a plan on how we're going to get our credit rating back up so we're not wasting money, but also a plan on how we're going to get ourselves back online after a costly cyber attack that have cost us, far more than just that 18 million.
And Andrew, you mentioned we hired a lot of people over the past couple years. In the past 5 years, so 5 years ago, City of Hamilton employees roughly about 8,500. Within the past 5 years, we hired roughly about 1,200 people, 1,200 more. So
Mhm.
today is roughly about 9,500 employees. Do
Yeah.
you think the City of Hamilton or government is too large or just simply inefficient? Do we need so much employees or
It's a fair question. So I have looked at some other municipalities, and I believe similar municipalities. I think Hamilton does have a higher employee count per citizen. I believe Hamilton does have more employees than a lot of other similar cities. As we said, or, maybe kind of as we've been talking about, a lot of this relates back to efficiency, how they're actually getting the work done. And are we doing so in the most efficient manner? And I think at this point, that answer is a clear no. We're not doing things efficiently. So we want to improve how we do things. And look, I'm not going to come in here and say we're going to cut staff by X amount or anything of that nature. What I do want to see is a better value proposition for taxpayers in terms of how we're getting things done, how we're doing things, more efficiently, because that's the ultimate test is, can we use our tax dollars a little bit more efficiently? We absolutely can. And we can talk about examples until I'm blue in the face.
yep. And there was a councillor or should I just, say, uh, we all know in the city of Hamilton that we don't really have a revenue problem; we have a spending problem.
Yes.
What should taxpayers expect from you regarding fiscal responsibility? It's one of your priorities, Andrew, that you focus
Sure.
on.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, I would love to see a line by line audit of our budget in our departments. So, really, and that'd be a third party independent audit of all city departments to find where overlaps exist. And I think there is a significant amount of overlap where we have multiple departments doing the same thing. Um, Again, that consultant gap. So, where can we eliminate consultants? Where can we train some of the workforce that we have hired? Those a huge increase to our workforce. Can we train some of those individuals to do these core tasks that we're hiring consultants for? I sure think we can. We need to digitize the basics. So again, so much of this opportunity goes back to a lack of efficiency and also having our systems up to date with modern standards. I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of people that work for City Hall, be it counselors or just regular workers like you and me. But they've all reached out to me and told me, we have huge inefficiencies in our systems. They're outdated. They're not up to modern standards that you see in other cities. And we can certainly work on that and accelerate that process to digitize some of those basics. And then finally, I want to see commercialization, our commercial sector get revitalized. So a big issue in Hamilton is, the resident taxpayers bear a heavy burden of the tax base. So if we can bring in more, light industrial to the city, they can start to carry some more of that tax base. And I think there is concrete steps that we can do to encourage some of that coming into the city.
And another priority focus of yours, Andrew, is safety. A few years ago, we you there was an article in the Hampton Spectator where homeless people were digging tunnels in Gage Park,
Right.
and of course, you have spoken extensively about homelessness, encampments. What concerns you most about? Well, of course, now after the encampment protocols, I believe March 2025. What concerns you most about the current situation? I know you walk the escarpment trails every day.
Sure. What concerns me most is those people and their condition. I want to see them taken care of. Um, I've had a chance to talk to a lot of those people, and it's it's tough. It's tough. What I want to see is, you know, those people brought into housing. We need to help people. And sorry, getting a little emotional
Oh
because
wow!
I have talked to these people, and they're folks like you and me. One
What
of
are
the guys
some
I
of the things they said, Andrew, that
apologize.
caused
um,
that emotion?
yeah, yeah. I bought some. I bring them coats. I bring them stuff in the winter. Um, I would maybe too hard on some of these folks sometimes, right? Like I've made mistakes in my life, and I've been lucky that I've had a lot of people to help me. These folks need someone to help them. But what they've told me is, I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost myself, and this is where I ended up. And yeah, there is still people out there in the woods. There's a lot of them. What I think we need to do to help them at scale is readdress our shelter system, how we're actually housing these people in those shelters, creating more individual spaces for them with locking doors behind them. So many of those folks tell me the shelters are not safe. They don't feel comfortable going into them due to that communal living space. So I think we need a material redesign of that shelter space to give them some of that privacy and dignity back. Um, well, I've been incredibly lucky in my life. I haven't wound up there myself, but there is certainly timelines and situations that could have happened that could have been me. And, I try to put myself in their shoes a little bit more now. But that's my main concern is seeing them helped. Now, what I'll say, we also have a huge garbage and accumulated debris issue within that rail trail right now. So I've been speaking, recently about there's a huge amount of propane tanks directly beside that rail line. So certainly I want to see those people get help. That's my main concern. But I also have a huge concern about the potential for, an industrial accident or an explosion. directly beside that rail line due to hundreds of propane tanks. So just that is an issue I've been working on recently. I've been communicating with provincial, federal officials, as well as officials from the rail line to work on getting that addressed. We saw just a motion last week, I think, from Councillor Matt Francis to address that. And I think that was in part because he saw some of the advocacy I've been doing around that. And I did my first delegation on that about a year ago, and we've stayed after that since then. But yeah, I want to see those people get helped. I want to see that environment get cleaned up and really just ensure it's as safe as possible for everyone.
Yep, it was the motion, yes, for again the cleanup on Wood Ward and Eastport in his ward that's just north of the Rona on the east of Hamilton. Um, and well, you did touched on some of the other questions I have, but a big one is what role should the province and federal government play in solving the homelessness crisis? I do believe a year or 2 years ago, Hamilton, spent over 200 million,
Yeah.
and of course that takes a bit of the budget. City, intake is about 2 point something billion, and they're always requesting more money from provincial or federal to help
Sure.
with the homelessness. What role you think provincial or federal, plays in solving this?
That's a can of worms, Daniel. There's a lot to do there. So yeah, certainly they need to step up in terms of the money that they're kicking in on this solution. Hamilton cannot continue to foot such a high bill for an issue that is largely that is in part outside our control. Certainly, you know, something I realize is Hamilton is a services city, and it always has been. There's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe it's our industrial base. It may be some of that reason. So people are always going to come here for those services, and they always have. The federal and provincial government can certainly step up there. And I had an opportunity about a year ago to have a chat with the federal housing minister, and that was the first thing I said to him: "Is we need help. We need your help here." Um, there's certainly the opportunity. We could talk about treatment spaces, and that's a huge opportunity. The unfortunate reality is addiction plays a um, significant role in a lot of the houselessness situation. So certainly, if we can continue to build out more treatment centers, that's going to be a hugely positive thing. But yeah, show me the money is what I'm going to say to the province and the federal government, because we need all the help we can get.
Yep, and of course, as part of safety, as you mentioned, another problem is the drugs we have in Hamilton. I believe in February 2026, 199 people overdosed with
It's
drugs, the
shocking.
opioids, the fentanyl in Hamilton. And yes, you have raised concerns about drug consumption sites in public spaces like libraries, in
Mhm.
particular the Central Hamilton Library.
Sure.
Believe a few weeks ago they closed for a temporary period of time and then reopened. People can only enter if they have a pass or like an
Mhm.
actual with the library. Why is that issue important to you?
You know, um,
Of course,
I'm a parent.
children and families, they
That's
use
it.
the
Yeah,
library. We can't have drugs people doing drugs inside the library where children and families, they use those facilities.
precisely.
But
Yeah.
yep,
And we're not going to be able to get downtown back on track unless we deal with that situation around the library and the market. Um, I'm lucky. I've been going down to the market my entire life. I can tell you about, going back down to the market with my grandma on the HSR in the 1980s, and, getting off the bus and walking through those doors, and it just being a magical experience. The opioid crisis is obviously, again, something outside of our direct control here in Hamilton, Ontario. It's unfortunately a global issue. Um, until we deal with that treatment side, there's going to be significant opportunities. But really, I think the reality is we can't have people consuming drugs in public spaces. It's a concern from the park standpoint as well. And just yesterday, I was walking down one of my Ward 3 alleys, and right there in the alley was a needle, block and a half from my kid's school. That hurts. You don't want to see that. So, and obviously, until we get some of the treatment online, we're going to struggle with that issue. But I think we need to set clear expectations and boundaries in terms of where we're seeing that type of consumption. And it's not going to be in the library. And certainly, I don't think anyone finds that acceptable.
Yep, and really, how do we really solve this problem and support these people struggling with addiction, while also protecting the community spaces, and like how so roughly about 20 years ago, Andrew, I'm not sure if you know how Finland solved the homelessness crisis.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Housing.
today in the street housing, and in the street of Helsinki, there is no homeless person holding up a cardboard saying they need help. But we tend to continue to see that in Hamilton. So how can we really support? Is it funding? Is it housing? As you mentioned, some feel the homeless people feel that the shelters are unsafe. What more can Hamilton really do to help these uh, people that are struggling with addiction?
Sure. Great question. I've certainly read about Helsinki as well, the Helsinki model and how they've approached that with housing first solution. I think that is what we need to do here in Hamilton. So, you referenced, I talked about shelters. I think a key component we need to do is that addressing the environmental design of those shelters and getting individual units and locked doors for people. Um, I actually like the micro shelter model. I think there's a huge opportunity there as well.
Mhm.
It might be more for a second tier up as they graduate out of a shelter with an individual unit, and then we start to move to micro shelters. But I've kind of run on that approach because I think it's proven successful. We've seen some success here in spite of it going far over budget in terms of the people, and that's what we're trying to do, right? So I do have a strong belief in that micro shelter model. As I said, there's only so much we can do in terms of we can't address the root cause. We're not going to be able to address, the narcotics coming into this country or being produced. But what we can do is respond to the crisis in the best way possible. And I think that is, as you said, through a housing first model. And that starts with addressing how we're actually housing them within the shelters themselves.
And thoughts around safe consumption sites, or these they call it health centers. Uh, we have one right here in Ward 3, I think, on Wentworth and Cannon. Wentworth
Yeah,
Street
the
and
heart hub.
Cannon. Yep. Thoughts
Yeah,
around these safe consumption sites?
I'm going to tell you first, I'm not an expert. And,
Okay.
because
Good answer.
I've had a lot of experts change to me and say, remember, you're not an expert. And, I know a lot of people in this space, and I got a huge amount of respect for them. My sister works in the social work space, and I think she's an absolute saint for what she does, and she's probably way stronger than I am. Um, Same things else. So we've obviously transitioned to the Heart Hub model in Ontario, and that's a provincial decision. Safe consumption is not a decision that is made at the municipal level. We don't have the ability to make that decision. So I think what we really have to do is work within the guidelines that we do have. So safe consumption isn't within those guidelines. We don't have that. And I'll say it, wouldn't you want that next door to yourself? It certainly is not something I want next door to my house. And I think a lot of people may share that feeling. But at the end of the day, it's a provincial decision. We don't make that decision municipality within our municipality. But ultimately, it again goes back to what can we do to respond to a problem? Housing. That's our best opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, of course, the next part of questions is really around accountability and transparency. And of
Mhm.
course, not to be too repetitive, I would say I would ask, should residents have more direct say in decisions like major developments or tax increases? Because you already touched on some things what we could do to have better accountability, transparency, and of course, open data tools and etc. Dashboard tools that you can push as a counselor. But should residents have more direct say in decisions like major developments or tax increases?
It's an interesting question. So, we have to work within the municipal act itself, right? So that's really going to dictate how a lot of decisions are made. Um, I certainly want to see residents heard as much as possible, and I think there's a lot of projects where we have not been heard. And again, the micro shelter project is one of those issues. What I would say is, I want to see citizens get involved, and the path of least resistance is making that choice yourself. So that might be going down to a council meeting and speaking. That might be talking to your neighbors about the issue. For a lot of people, it's going to be voting, but I want to see that number get a lot higher. So right now, we only have about 30% of people in Ward 3 voting in municipal elections. If you want to be able to make decisions or be a part of those decisions, you got to vote. So we need to get that number higher. I don't know that we really have a direct opportunity to vote on issues, for example. But what we can do is solicit information or feedback rather from residents in a more efficient manner. And again, present that clearly, concisely, and truthfully to the public in terms of what the actual public sentiment is. So, my main takeaway or my main advice for residents or, how we can actually start to get a bit more hand in the pot is get involved. Just get down there, get involved, email people, talk to people, vote.
And Andrew, do you know why only 30% people in Ward 3 only vote and not 100%?
I wish it was 100. Why it's unfortunately nevertheless gone down, decade after decade, right? I think in the city of Hamilton, maybe it tops out around 40%. Ward 3 is one of the lower voting wards, if not the lowest. It's apathy. It's people that look at politics and say, I can't change anything about this. I used to be that myself with, when I was looking at federal and provincial politics. I quickly learned when you start showing up, you can make a difference. So I think it's been that. So people have looked at, the way things have gone and they say it always has to go this way. It doesn't. And what I'll say is, there's a lot of people out there that can vote that aren't. So you might be a student living here, where your permanent residence is in Guelph, you're living in Hamilton. Those people should know you can vote in both locations. If you're an investor, if you own a home in Hamilton, but you live in Toronto, for example, and you own a rental in Hamilton, you can vote in both locations, and you should. We should be encouraging as many people to vote as possible because that's our most direct route to engaging with democracy.
So I'll just repeat what Andrew said. For people that live in Toronto or outside of Hamilton and they own properties in Ward 3 or in Hamilton, you can vote as well. And for all
Yeah.
the student population in Hamilton, or if that enrolled in whatever school in Hamilton, you can also vote in Hamilton. And so moving more into the topic of social media, criticism, controversy, you are very, very active on X, Andrew. Do you think social media has changed local politics?
I think so. Um, and I say that from speaking to people who are making some of the decisions. So I know that some issues I've talked about, I've posted about, have led to direct changes in the city from hearing the people that vote on the issues. Um, Certainly, social media has changed politics at the federal, the provincial level. It'd probably be naive to think it hasn't changed it at our level as well. Um, I think that in part can be a really good news story, though. I created my social media account just to talk, or my accounts, just to really talk about local issues, municipal issues. Um, and I have had so many people reach out and say, I didn't know about this credit downgrade. I didn't know about this procurement fiasco with the microshelter project. So that's been a really positive news story for me. More people are getting information. I think as long as you present it truthfully and accurately, it's hugely beneficial.
Yep. And some people say you're holding council accountable, right? Calling them out on these matters. And then we have a motion passed for the cleaning up of the dumping in certain areas. But others say you're too confrontational. How do you respond to both sides?
That's a good question. I go back to the dinner table, those dinner table conversations with my father. Um, Again, international businessman. he didn't really accept um, answers that weren't straight and direct, and that's how I communicate. Um, Especially when talking about problems, I don't think there's a ton of value in sugarcoating issues. I like to speak very directly about issues. So I really don't think I am, I think people maybe misconstrue directfulness as confrontational. What I am is an incredibly positive person. I walk around with a smile on my face 23 hours a day. I try to at least. I'm someone that likes to receive feedback. So if people have something, negative about how I present information or how I approach a problem, I like to hear about that. Um, so I can understand kind of where they're coming from if you're not used to a very direct approach. But what I will say is, I take this direct approach because I love this city. I see the opportunities and really I just want to address them together as neighbors.
So the message is, do not misconstrue Andrew, right? Andrew is a happy, positive, friendly, approachable person with a nice smile. All right. So
Right.
for all you guys out there, and do you think political debate has become too polarized?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I see it online where people say, that person's a left wing person or that person's a right wing person. I don't care, honestly. I'm not associated with a party. I don't ask when we're talking about issues with my neighbors what party they voted for. I just want to work on issues together. So that's what my main focus is, not worrying about left or right or center. I just want to work on problems that we all agree upon is a problem and find solutions that we all find acceptable.
So very, very solution oriented. Doesn't matter left, right, blue, black,
Doesn't
whatever
matter.
color. You want to solve the problem.
Right? Yeah. I mean, how many people in your actual life, when you're discussing a problem, ask, hey, who'd you vote for when we're talking about, fixing the roads? Doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Yep. And have you ever posted anything on X and you later regretted?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, what I'll say is, as a father, as a man, I have done a ton of things I've later regretted, or a ton of things I've learned from. Um, so, in life, I think we all do that. And as I've got older, I've got better at saying, I'm sorry, saying I approached this wrong, saying I didn't have enough information. And I've tried to get more information. Like I said, I have two older sisters, and sometimes they'll say things, and we were talking about treatment or something of that case. And one of my sisters gave me heck, and she pointed out we don't have enough treatment facilities. And I try to really take in that feedback, listen to what people are saying, listen to experts. But the main takeaway is just listen, hear people out, hear their viewpoints and their standpoints. And when I am in the wrong, I certainly do try to apologize, and I've done a lot of that in my life.
So for all you folks out there, Andrew is a human being, right? Don't misconstrue him. He is a family guy and he's a good guy. And
Right.
so he's so so for you guys who think Andrew is very confrontational. And what have you learned about public communications since entering politics or speaking on these political matters? What have you learned about public communication, Andrew?
That's a good question. Slow down, listen, and think about what you're saying. So really, try to consider the groups that you may be affecting when you're speaking about issues. And, got a little emotional talking about the homelessness issue before. One thing I think I was not necessarily previously, I don't think I did understand kind of their viewpoint enough. Um, so that's something I really did learn from was, I've tried to step more into other people's shoes as I've started approaching issues across our neighborhood. And it could be from all different types of standpoints. But that's been a big learning opportunity for me is view things from other people's standpoints more. And just one more thing I'll add on that. I was talking with like an accessibility advocate one day. I was telling him, my father recently he had to move into a wheelchair. And I was telling this accessibility advocate how difficult it was getting over curbs. And, I told him, you now have an ally because I learned how difficult it is pushing this wheelchair over a curb. And he said to me in the nicest possible way, and this is something I always take with me, that's not good enough. I need you to think about this before it affects you, this issue, because you're not helping me if you only start worrying about it once it started affecting myself. And that's something you can apply to all kinds of things in life. And Anthony, that's something I'm going to take forever if you're listening to this. So I appreciate Anthony pointing that out to me.
Yeah, very powerful lessons, Andrew. So every time you see Andrew walking his dog on the street and you give him a shout out to confront Andrew, just know that, you know,
Come and chat.
he's, oh, come, let's have a chat. Let's
Right?
have a
Yeah,
chat.
exactly.
And
Yeah, yeah.
he will get to know about you and, of course, learn your perspectives.
And I will tell you, Daniel, it's been one more of the positive conversations than those confrontational conversations with neighbors or people on the street. Um, I can think of one negative conversation like that, and they know who they are. And I'm glad we had that conversation. But gosh, so many more positive conversations about stuff that's going on in our neighborhood, and that's really been something that's lifted me up personally.
Absolutely. Andrew is a great listener, for everyone out there. Now going these questions, next few questions are more about the future of Hamilton, Andrew. Imagine Hamilton in 20 years. What kind of city do you want it to be? I presume in 20 years we'll have Slate Asset Management finish the industrial hub and industrial sector, the Pier 8,
Yep.
redevelopment, 142 million happening at the Williams Fresh Cafe there at the waterfront. But what kind of city do you want it to be 20 years from now?
That's a great question. And, of course, I'm raising my daughter here. I hope she lives in this city in 20 years from now, just like I live in this city after my parents being born here and my grandparents being born here. So I want a city with complete streets. I want a Hamilton where Barton, Main Street, where Kenilworth are corridors of vibrant, safe, healthy communities with local shops, not boarded up windows as we see right now. Um, I want a city where the basics are done right by default. So, a city where be it clean alleys or safe parks are the expectation and not something that we're working towards. Um, I want a city where in the future, my daughter, after she's done school, it doesn't feel like she has to move to Kitchener, Toronto to find a high paying career. So, that might be, through fostering a tech hub here in Canada. Maybe she's going to work in tech, who knows? Or sort of rather here in Hamilton. But I also want to see a city where public transit is certainly prioritized and continues to be, really the backbone of our community. I want to see a community where we continue to have light manufacturing and bring in more of that. A community where local small businesses thrive and receive everything they need from our local government to do so. And then finally, a city where we have restored civic pride. So what that means to me is, gosh, I would love more citizens when they walk past something wrong, be it a piece of garbage on the street or something they need to call bylaw about, they do so. And they do so in, the simplest manner that gets the problem solved the quickest. So that's what I see for Hamilton as we go forward. And that's really what I hold in my heart for what's important to me.
Very well said, Andrew. And you touched on some of the light industrial, before. What industries, or well, other industries, should Hamilton focus on for economic growth? Of course, yes, industrial. That's one. But what else, comes to your mind that we should focus on for economic growth?
Sure. So, I mean, um, medical technology is going to be, I think, a huge opportunity as we move forward. McMaster is a world-class university with world-class research facilities. So I'd love to see Hamilton continue to be a leader in that medical tech and life sciences field. Green steel, you mentioned it earlier. Hamilton is seeing that transition to green steel. Um, we've always been a get it done town. Let's see that get done and continue to see, thousands of people employed in good paying jobs within our steel industry. Um, I think we have a big opportunity in logistics and supply chain. So, of course, we have Amazon up on the mountain. We probably can continue to build up our base of logistic businesses. We have a triple threat here. We have the airport, we have a deep water port, We have major highway access, all here in Hamilton. Let's continue to build upon that and really be a huge logistics and supply chain hub. And then anything I can do to continue supporting the creative class in our city. So, my family, one of my sisters is and her partner are deeply involved in the arts. My first love in terms of employment, my very first job was as a commercial photographer. I love the arts. I want to see the arts continue to thrive in Hamilton, be it on Ottawa Street in some of our galleries, at the art gallery downtown, or certainly on James Street. So, all of those are hugely important to me and things that I think we can continue to foster.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with a gentleman who called me a few days ago who lives in Burlington. He says, "You guys got everything in Hamilton. Burlington, we got nothing here."
We got a lot of fun stuff in Hamilton. Like we have such
Yeah.
a diverse, diverse population, which is a huge benefit, right? And yeah, I love this city for all it has to offer.
And Andrew, how can now? What I would say is we do have a very big Amazon fulfillment center. We have IKEA coming, right? If they haven't come already, and we have these big businesses coming into Hamilton. Of course, we need more, but how can Hamilton attract more investments, more jobs, which of course will in turn make the city more prosperous? How else what more can Hamilton do to attract these investments and jobs?
Daniel, you have to be the fastest city. So investors hate uncertainty. Uncertainty. Hamilton has to go from, as we talked about, being one of the slowest permitting offices in the country
Mhm.
to one of the fastest. Speed can be our competitive advantage, and we can do so by leveraging data and technology to get us there. Um, Lower our cost of living. Huge opportunities in our tax dollars. And again, we've talked about some of the inefficiencies in our city. We can lower the cost of tax increases to our residents by focusing on efficiency. We need to be predictable in terms of what our tax increases are actually going to be. So businesses need to know what their cost is going to be in a couple of years. We need to stop rating the reserves so we can be a little bit more predictable as we move forward. Um, and then really, I think we can attract more jobs and businesses setting up shop here by being more active again in our information presentation. So if we can present information to the end user, be it city councilors, people like myself, people that want to set up shop in the city through some of those dashboards where they can proactively see what's the status of Hamilton, that can be a competitive advantage as well. So that's really where I see some huge
Um,
opportunity.
And Andrew, in the private sector, business people will say less regulation, less taxes. What's one policy change that could dramatically improve Hamilton's future? If there's any other that you can think of that other than what you already mentioned.
I mean, just that accountability and transparency first model. I think we can have a significant advantage if we become a municipality where that's the expectation and not the outlier result. So when people know what to expect, then when they trust their information is correct and up to date, that can really help decisions get made quicker. So by doing so, more transparent, more efficient, more information, that can really help individuals, businesses, anyone that wants to come to Hamilton.
And is there any lessons that Hamilton can learn from other cities? You mentioned Detroit previously. What other cities is a great example that Hamilton should follow? Um, and, and hopefully the good things that they should follow to improve the city.
I love what Burlington's doing with the arts. So I'm just going to mention that really quickly. There's some really cool public art installations and kind of how they're approaching merging public spaces with art. Shout out to Burlington. Love what they're doing with the arts, and I would love to continue to see Hamilton thrive by taking some of that on.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move more to uh um city council, right? As you were months, leading into the election. And you already know city council often has conflict. How would you work with councillors who disagree with you? Andrew Selman, Ward 3, Councillor. How would you work with councillors who disagree with you? If that's not too much of a future question to ask, but you can speak more on how Andrew Selman is working very well with others so far. You have sit in the Hamilton Police Services, the advisory committee, Division 2, and how you have worked with others or other stakeholders so far, Andrew, in the city. Yep, your
I think
communication style, your work, your team worker style, working with others.
sure. So, you know, I take the same approach that I take in my work life, that I take in my personal life, that I take in addressing any problem. And I think that is typically clearly defining the problem, and then discussing that with others. As you said, I like to discuss issues. So really what I like to hear is other people's viewpoints. And then I like to kind of work through that and understand, are we getting to the root causes together? And what we're identifying as that root cause, is it going to lead to improvement? But really, I like to take a collaborative approach. So be it with, some certain member, I work with counselors presently. I often discuss issues with them. Um, with those I disagree with, you know what, they send me emails sometimes too. And I'm happy to receive them. So, really it's all about communication. Being open, clear, and concise about what you believe the problem is, as well as your solution, is the quickest pathway towards resolution and building a better city.
I think with having a very direct communication style, Andrew, um, you um, what, I lost my train of thought there, but it's not a reactive, uh, reaction. It's more like a response, right? You have that ability to listen to the other person's perspective, and you're not afraid to agree to disagree, right?
It's important.
And
It's
yeah,
so important.
yeah. And
Yeah.
even though if someone is on the opposing side of with their perspective, that you can still have that balance type of conversation. So that's a great ability to have. What's your leadership style if you were to say, what do you say? I think I just highlighted one.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? Like, a direct approach, an approach that empowers others. So, I want to hear what others feel. I want to see what others' solutions are. My leadership approach is probably largely defined by the teachings of Six Sigma. Really, I try to, when I approach a problem, I take the DMAIC approach, which is define a problem, you measure it, you analyze that problem, you improve it, which is where you take your actions, and then you control it. So my leadership approach is a very structured approach. I take that in really any problem I have within my life, be it, trying to fix my deck and defining exactly how many boards I need to replace, or addressing, budgetary issues within our city. But yeah, a very defined, structured approach.
Yep. And that comes with your analytical
The analytics
background,
background.
Andrew. So
Yeah.
very good. All right, let's do a little bit of a test questions, Andrew. If you had 100 million to improve Hamilton, how would you spend it?
Infrastructure. Probably
Great answer.
50 million moving into our infrastructure, road, sewer, sidewalks. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about ribbon cutting projects. I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff. Um, maybe 10 mil or so for improving pedestrian safety, heavily focused on crosswalks, sidewalks, making sure there's not making sure we avoid every injury to pedestrians as possible. I'd probably put 20 million into the basics, which is, in my case, I'd like to see our reserve funds go back up. So let's put some money back into our reserves, and that could prevent future tax increases. Um, and then additional money, probably, another 20 million into improving some of the blight that we see around this city. So, working on our alleys, cleaning those alleys up, paving them, improving lighting, directing money towards our bylaw department where required,
Mhm.
to take a really direct approach with bylaw enforcement where we start to see some huge improvements.
And as you sit on the advisory committee in the Hamilton Police Service, they have requested an increase in budget in recent years. Would any, you know, what are your views on should they have an increase in budget for increase in safety in our city? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, the police services budget, it's an interesting one because at the end of the day, the city doesn't have that much control over that budget itself. They can push back against if we try to limit that budget, there's limited control there. What I'll say is, I have a pretty decent understanding of where some of those increases are coming from. So there are significant increases to technology costs. And a lot of these things are, I said this to the Hamilton police a couple of weeks ago. You guys and ladies can do a way better job at communicating this out to the public because I think people are unaware of this. So huge increases to technology costs. For example, we have body cameras now. All of that data, the video from the body camera has to get uploaded into the cloud. It has to get scrubbed for personal information. Faces are getting blurred out in the background. There's a lot of cost there. Huge cost increases around ammunition recently. So that's another cost they're taking on. There's also been legislative costs that are related to upgrades in body armor that they had to commit to, as well as upgrades to firearms, where they all have to carry an automatic rifle within their vehicle. So there's some serious budget challenges there that are even outside of the control of the Hamilton Police. That said, there is a huge opportunity for us to continue to go through the police budget by a line by line basis and find savings where we can. And I commend Councillor Spatafora for doing so and finding some savings within the budget during this last cycle.
Absolutely. And what is the most wasteful spending decision the city has made recently? We have many, but recently or whatever comes to your mind.
That's a good question. I'm not going to talk about the micro shelters. We've gone over those. We've gone over the consultants. I'm going to say the cost of silence. And that cost of silence is manifested in the multiple missing reports that we have that are impacting this city's ability to do business. So be it the development charges, treasury report, our missing financial statements. Um, these are all having a significant impact on our ability to operate our city in an efficient manner. And the fact is, it's costing us huge amounts of money that I think taxpayers really should be made aware of.
Absolutely, Andrew. And what is one good decision city council made?
Sunsetting the encampment protocol.
That's very true. Yes, I
Yeah.
I did see improvements.
Mhm.
Less break and enter, and crime, in the streets in those areas, and of course, residents are pleased. But what has transpired in 2025 since encampment protocols, I believe in March, was they moved from one place to the other, and then at one point in time, they ended up right in front of City Hall. They stayed there.
You the
They
protest there.
put up the signs called Tent City, and then they shifted them, and they ended up in Wentworth, and then they moved them elsewhere.
It's a work
Um,
in progress for sure.
Absolutely. And what's one policy where you might disagree with your supporters?
This might surprise some of them.
I'm
Bike
sorry.
lanes. I said
The
this might surprise some of them. Bike lanes. I have
bike lanes.
Bike
Yes.
lanes. Yeah. Bike lanes represent a fraction of a fraction within our budget. There's a lot of pushback against bike lanes. And, some of it's from, motorists that look at a bike lane and they think, we could move this bike lane and I could get somewhere a little bit quicker. Um, I support mixed use infrastructure. I have no issue with bike lanes. I'm a cyclist myself. So, I don't agree that we should get rid of all of our bike lanes that we've put money into. It's a really small cost. I think we can continue to build up that infrastructure and foster cycling within the city.
Yep. And I think the bike lane decision on Main Street East, this was on no, by Red Hill was deferred. Was deferred till
Yes.
next. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there were some misunderstanding the community about that deferral. I'd have to go back and look at it exactly, but I believe that deferral was just because we didn't have a contractor or something of that nature lined
Mhm.
up yet. So really, that deferral was just to align with the actual likely construction that was going to take place. But yeah, that was misconstrued within a large portion of the people that watch this nitty gritty stuff
Mhm.
within City Hall.
Yep. So some lighter questions, Andrew. So the viewers and listeners who live in Hamilton and don't live in Hamilton, but are very interested in Hamilton and would like to get to know Andrew better, so they don't misconstrue Andrew. He is a very nice person. What do you do when when you're not talking about politics? What do you do?
Um, every day after school, we spend an hour outside playing at the playground. You will find myself and my daughter there, usually with their little bestie, Georgie, there for an hour every day after school. Rain, shine, negative 20 degrees outside. We are outside. I'm an outdoorsman. I love the outdoors. So you'll find me out in the forest all the time, walking the dog. You'll find me out in Gage Park. You will find me um, doing community cleanups, and we have some of those coming up. So I'm looking forward to that. But really, what I love to do is be active outside. I love photography. I've kind of returned back to my initial first career, which, as I said, was a commercial photographer, and I've tried to get back into photography again recently and learned the crazy world of digital photography, being a film photographer myself back in the day. So, I'm a pretty varied person. Most of what I love is talking to people, though. That's something I really took from my father. And my daughter will go to the park and she'll say, what dad do you need to go talk to? Go talk to that dad. And I'll go talk to that dad, because I love talking to people and meeting people. And that's something I really personally benefit from, I think, is meeting and chatting with new people.
So definitely a family person and a very people's person. Okay, Andrew
I'm
is
a
a
people
people's
person.
person.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other favorite outdoor places in Hamilton?
I love Bayfront Park. Spent a lot of time in my life at Bayfront Park. I've spent a lot of time at the farmers market. I love the farmers market. Again, great memories of going there with my grandma back in the day. I love City Hall. Um, some of my earliest memories are taking the HS. My parents would pack us up on New Year's Eve, send us to our grandparents' house. My parents would probably go out and have fun somewhere, and the four of us kids would go down to City Hall with my grandma, watch the ball drop at like 8 p.m., I guess, and then go back to grandma's house for a sleepover. So yeah, all of that stuff downtown, I absolutely love. Right here in Ward 3, I love, all of our local restaurants and shops. Ottawa Street's a huge family thing we do all the time, and we love Bernie's Tavern on Cannon Street, just down the street from us here. That's like our local kind of family restaurant and spot, and it's a wonderful place.
And any other restaurants, Andrew? Not to be too fair.
Oh my gosh. I love the French. The French is absolutely wonderful. I can't recommend that enough. So yeah, the French may be one of my other top restaurants.
The next is this one is one of my favorite questions. What books or thinkers influence your views? I am a very avid reader. What books or thinkers influence your views?
Good question. Um, I love Stephen King books. They're probably not influence me very much, but just from an entertainment standpoint, I love Stephen King. Um, Recent book I read was by Romeo Dallaire. It's called Shake Hands with the Devil. General Dallaire was in the Canadian military. It's a book about dealing with some of the harshest realities in life, and dealing with leadership under pressure. I learned so much from that book, and how he processed some of those extreme pressure events. And that's really given me a strong guide and something I can really take away from.
All right,
Another
good.
one,
Yeah, go
one
for
that
it.
people may not know, is called Pardon My Lunchbox. It's a book that was published by the city of Hamilton on the 125th anniversary of our city. I think my copy has a postcard from Victor Kops in it, which is pretty neat. One of our previous mayors. So it's a really neat book. So, it's a book published in, I guess it's the 70s. And it looks forward to what Hamiltonians thought Hamilton would look like in the 2020s. So it's an interesting and forward looking book about, really what we want to drive towards. Some of the goals have been met within that book. Some of the other ones, yeah, we're not going to work on flying cars. So some of the other things don't necessarily align, but yeah, that's a really interesting publication. If you had a chance, try to find yourself a copy. It's called Pardon My Lunchbox, and yeah, Lunchbox, Hamilton's 125th anniversary book.
Yep. And then you said the third one was Bernard, something with Lunchbox.
No,
Uh,
that's Pardon My Lunchbox.
oh,
The
pardon
first one
my
was
part.
Stephen King
Yep.
books. Second one was Roman Dallaire, Shake
Yep.
Hands with the Devil, and then Pardon My Lunchbox.
Yep. All right. We will make sure to put those in the notes there for those that are interested. And what
Yeah,
advice would you give young people interested in politics, Andrew? What
get
advice
involved.
would you give the young people?
Yeah, get involved. There's so many ways that you can get involved. It might be knocking on doors for a candidate starting May 1st. It might be going down to City Hall, just watching a meeting. I have good memories of being like 19 and going down to City Hall and watching planning meetings. It might be delegating at one of those meetings. If there's an issue that's important to you, maybe your rec center is closing, go and speak about it. Talk to your neighbors, talk to City Hall, send emails, get involved because you can make a difference if you start speaking up.
Very good answer. And final question. It's October 2026. Voters are deciding who to support. Why should someone in Ward 3 trust Andrew Selman with their vote?
Who I am is I'm not a career politician. I'm not looking for a new career here. I've actually been quite happy and content within my career. But what I am looking for is results. I want to see change within this city. I want to see our tax dollars treated with respect and used efficiently. And I want to see as many people helped as possible with the money that we're all pooling together within those tax dollars. Um, I think my auditing background, as well as my data analytics background, provide me with a unique skill set to come into really any organization, assess problems, find solutions, and then measure those solutions to ensure that they're impacting everyone in the best way possible.
Yep. Very, very well said, Andrew. I saw your camera is getting a bit blurred there. But I'll do hot takes, just very quick for short clips, okay? I'll ask these very quick questions and you can give any brief thoughts, or if you feel very strongly that you have to speak a bit more on the topic, because there's one I think I see here which you will want to speak a bit more on, but very, for quick answers. What comes to mind? You say the answer. LRT,
Yeah.
light rail transit, yes or no?
I'm LRT skeptical. My big concern here is how much it's going to cost. I'm excited about seeing our roads get fixed. You look at other municipalities where we've enacted the LRT and it's cost a lot more than quoted. And it costs a lot more per kilometer than we're currently factoring in. I'm an HSR guy. I support the HSR. I've been an HSR rider my entire life. As we move towards the LRT, I want to ensure that I see as many HSR workers actually driving those LRTs and staying working. So, huge supporter of the HSR. I'm a little skeptical about how much the LRT is going to cost. We haven't fully finalized all of our agreements with the provincial and federal governments, so I'm a little skeptical there.
Property taxes, too high?
Too high.
Too
I
high,
didn't even read the
yes, you're
question.
right.
Too high. Again, efficiency, Daniel. We can actually provide better services um, for lower money by improving our efficiency, and there's a ton of opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. Encampments in parks,
Never,
or
never.
correct.
We need to,
Yep.
we need to address the shelter system, but we can't have encampments in parks. It's not safe for the kids playing there, and the fact is, it's not safe for the individuals staying in those tents either.
Yep, I believe there was a policy that you can't live in parks, but in the pandemic, yes, they removed it. And then that's how we
Yeah,
had this whole encampment situations in parks.
that's
More
right.
density.
Yes. More
Yes.
density, absolutely. Yeah, I've talked so much about, you know, 1135 Main Street East, for example. That's an opportunity where we can bring in density. It's around the corner for me here. I'm pretty close to that location. So yeah, we're looking gentle build density within neighborhoods, especially, absolutely do so. But yeah, I want to see Hamilton get building. I want to see people working. I want to see people building.
The next one is a very interesting one. Strong mayor powers.
Outside of our control, if we don't really dictate that. What I want to see is strong mayor accountability, leadership, and where we do have strong mayor powers, ensuring that all voices are heard. So, I heard there was a big contrast between how the Hamilton budget went through and the Burlington budget went through. And a lot of that was related to collaboration, where Burlington did a lot better collaboration as opposed to Hamilton, where there wasn't that collaboration between the councillors and the mayor. So at the end of the day, strong mayor powers, they are what they are. We don't necessarily dictate who's granted those powers, but what we can do is dictate how they are utilized.
Absolutely. Accountability, strong mayor accountability, not strong mayor
Right.
powers. I love it. I love it, Andrew. And just for the viewers and listeners, difference between Hamilton and Burlington. Burlington has one mayor, 5 councillors. That's their council structure, governing structure. We have 15 councillors and 1 mayor. So a bit
Yeah.
bigger. Biggest problem in Hamilton.
Accountability, the accountability
Accountability.
gap. Yeah. And it goes back to, all of this lacking information, which we really need to run our city in an efficient manner. So until we get accountability back at City Hall, this city is not going to be the best it can be.
Very well said, Andrew. And last but not least, one thing you'd change tomorrow.
Sunshine every day. Just kidding.
So,
um, what I want to see is a third party independent audit of our entire city budget and many of our city departments. So some independent audits to really ensure that our information is accurate and we're capturing all we need to.
very well said, Andrew. It was an absolute pleasure, Andrew, with this conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers and listeners in Hamilton or who live outside of Hamilton absolutely learned a lot about Hamilton and all the things that are happening in Hamilton. And very much appreciate your time for this podcast episode. Is there anything last words that you would like to say to anyone that is listening or viewing this video?
Doing my time for inviting and thank you for having me here. What I'd like to say is, get out and vote. The election is October 26th. I don't care who you vote for. I just want to see as many people voting, getting engaged, and working on solutions as possible together. So get out and vote. October election is going to come here in no time, and I hope you exercise your right.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. All right.
Thanks, Daniel. Take care.
Take care. I want to thank Andrew Selman for joining me remotely today and for this long, candid conversation. Andrew, your commitment to data, process, accountability, and above all, to making Hamilton a better place for the next generation is clear. Thank you for sharing your story, your frustrations, and your vision so openly. To everyone listening and watching, whether you live in Ward 3 or anywhere across Hamilton, I hope this episode gave you a clearer picture of the choices we face in the upcoming election and what's possible when citizens decide to step up. If you found value in this conversation, please share it with your neighbors, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. It truly helps these discussions reach more people. And as always, get out and vote on October 26th. Your voice matters. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chin. Take care, Hamilton.